Sister-in-law stole my Brea tea milk and sold it online along with all our other belongings while living with us, and my husband kept defending her until she took his wallet and laptop. My sister-in-law Clara is a certified kleptomaniac. However, her family refuses to acknowledge this fact and instead chooses to ignore it, pretending that she doesn't exhibit any signs of kleptomania. Meeting Steven's family for the first time when we had just started dating was an eye-opener, especially when it came to his sister. While everyone else was warm and welcoming, Clara seemed to have made up her mind about not liking me from the start. During lunch, she barely acknowledged my presence and avoided any interaction with me. I tried initiating conversation, even going as far as following her to the washroom, hoping for a chance to clear the air privately. However, what I stumbled upon in the washroom took me by surprise. There she was, discreetly stealing tissue paper from inside the washroom and putting them in her purse, which struck me as both disgusting and strange. Our eyes met, and she seemed taken aback that I had caught her in the act. Without saying a word, I chose to exit the situation gracefully, not wanting to embarrass her further or escalate the tension. After the awkward encounter with Steven's sister, I felt compelled to discuss it with him. However, his response caught me off guard. He simply laughed it off, dismissing her behavior as not a big deal, suggesting she probably needed a tissue for something. He told me that I was overthinking for no reason. While I tried to accept his explanation and let it go, it didn't quite sit right with me. Over the years, I have noticed similar incidents where Clara would take odd items from different places, further fueling my suspicion that she might be struggling with kleptomania. For example, one time Steven's mother, Janice, invited me to go shopping with her. I was excited to spend some one-on-one time with her. However, upon arriving at the mall, I realized that Clara, Steven's sister, was also joining us. I greeted her politely, but she merely nodded her head towards me in acknowledgement without saying a single word. While Janice and I went around the mall looking for some new clothes, Clara followed us all along. When we were trying out clothes, I noticed that Clara kept entering the fitting rooms with clothes but never came out with any of them. She would comment that none of the dresses looked good on her or suited her, even though she had tried on quite a few. Initially, I didn't pay much attention to this, thinking it was just her particular taste. Later, when we came out of the store and stopped for ice cream after our shopping spree, Clara generously offered to pay for everyone. As she opened her bag to retrieve her wallet, I noticed a familiar blue dress inside, the same one she had tried on earlier in the trial room and dismissed by saying it was too tight for her. I couldn't understand what the dress was doing in her handbag, and it raised a red flag in my mind. So I asked her when she had bought the dress from the store since I hadn't seen her make the purchase. My question caught the attention of Janice, who also looked back and noticed the dress in her daughter's bag. Clara quickly tried to conceal the dress by closing her bag and avoiding looking at me directly. It was quite apparent to me that Clara had clearly stolen the dress, and I just stared at her incredulously as she stammered to come up with an excuse. However, Janice then interrupted to downplay the seriousness of the matter, mentioning that maybe Clara had done that by mistake and that many people sometimes accidentally take things from the store. I was taken aback by her reaction, and I guess mother-in-law must have noticed my face change because she immediately backtracked on her words. She tried to clarify that she had no idea that Clara would do such a thing, and we should just forget about it. I argued back that if it was indeed an unintentional oversight, then we should rectify it by returning the dress. However, Janice insisted that going back to the store was unnecessary. She pointed out that the store was a large multinational corporation with plenty of clothes, implying that if Clara indeed stole this one dress, then it wasn't really a significant loss to them. Despite her attempts to dissuade me, I stood my ground firmly. I insisted that I would go back and pay for the dress, and they could either accompany me or I would go alone. Reluctantly, Janice and Clara agreed to accompany me back to the store, and in the end, I had to pay for the wretched dress since apparently Clara didn't even have enough money to pay for it. The whole incident just left a bitter taste in my mouth. Later that evening, I tried to talk to Steven about what had happened. I explained the situation with Clara and how uncomfortable it had made me. To my surprise, Steven told me I should have let it go and not embarrassed his sister, arguing that it wasn't really harming anyone. His response frustrated me. I told him I couldn't just ignore my moral responsibility, even if his family seemed comfortable with such behavior. Steven took great offense to my words, and the conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. He demanded that I apologize to him for saying such things about his family, but I refused. The disagreement grew so intense that I even considered breaking up with him if he couldn't find a resolution. Thankfully, after a few days of cooling off and reflecting, Steven came back to me with an apology. We had a long, heartfelt conversation where we realized that fighting over our family members wasn't worth jeopardizing our relationship. He admitted he was really protective about his sister. However, He understood why I felt the way I did and offered to pay me back for the dress. I declined his offer, appreciating the gesture. Since that day, I promised myself that I would just keep my mouth shut when it comes to his sister. The second incident involving Clara occurred at Stephen's cousin's baby shower. The event was filled with joy and anticipation as everyone gathered bearing gifts from her registry. Stephen's cousin, just 2 months away from giving birth, had a prominent baby bump and was beaming with excitement. We helped her cut the cake and open some of the gifts, sharing in her happiness. Later, I excused myself to use the washroom. As I walked past the bedroom, I was shocked to see Clara rummaging through all the gift boxes. She was sifting through the presents, clearly looking for something to steal, and my heart sank as I realized what she was about to do. Clara was planning to steal from an expectant mother who needed these items far more than Clara did. Although I had promised myself to keep my mouth shut about Clara's behavior after the last incident, I couldn't stand by and let her steal from someone so vulnerable. The thought of an expectant mother being deprived of essential items for her baby because of Clara's kleptomania was too much to bear. Despite my resolve to avoid conflict, I knew I had to intervene in some way. Knowing that Clara would be embarrassed if caught, I decided to handle the situation subtly. I walked back a few steps and cleared my throat, pretending to pass by again, hoping Clara would get the hint. As I approached the bedroom, I greeted her casually, making it seem like I had just happened to be passing through. Clara's reaction was immediate. She quickly stopped rummaging, got up, and exited the bedroom to rejoin the guests in the living room. I watched her go, shaking my head in disbelief at the lengths she would go to indulge her compulsion. It was clear to me just how problematic and inappropriate her behavior was, and it left me feeling even more uneasy about her presence at family gatherings. This time, I chose not to talk to Stephen about it, as I did not want another unnecessary fight where he would defend his sister and act like she didn't have a major issue. The final incident that truly sealed the nail in the coffin happened at our wedding. My mother had gifted me a pair of beautiful blue earrings that had been passed down through generations in our family. It was an incredibly emotional moment when she handed them to me, saying that one day I could pass them on to my own children. These earrings were my something blue for the wedding ceremony, and I cherished them deeply. After the ceremony was done and Stephen and I were officially married, I had planned on changing into a more comfortable outfit for our reception so I could move around and dance freely with my family and friends. I left the earrings in my bridal room, confident they would be safe. The venue was reputable and secure, and the only people present were our wedding guests whom I trusted implicitly. The reception was a joyous occasion. Stephen and I danced the night away, basking in the love and happiness that surrounded us. I couldn't believe that he was finally my husband. It was a perfect night filled with laughter and celebration. However, in the early hours of the morning, when my bridesmaids and I returned to the bridal suite to pack up our belongings, I noticed that the earrings were missing. Panic set in immediately as I looked around the room. I knew all my bridesmaids well, they were my childhood friends and would never steal from me. Everyone began frantically searching the room, hoping the earrings had simply fallen or been misplaced somewhere. My heart pounded as we tore the room apart, looking into every nook and cranny. I was freaking out and crying, devastated by the loss. These earrings meant so much to me, far beyond their financial value. They were a symbol of my family's heritage. As we continued searching, a terrible suspicion began to creep into my mind. I knew there was only one person at our wedding who was capable of stealing. Throughout the evening, I noticed Clara acting strangely. She had been hovering around the bridal room earlier, and during the reception, she had gone missing for some time. In hindsight, her overall behavior seemed very suspicious. My heart sank as I considered the possibility that she might have taken the earrings, since I already knew she liked stealing. Confronting Clara was the last thing I wanted to do on my wedding night, but the thought of losing such a precious family heirloom was unbearable. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and walked over to where she was standing, surrounded by the rest of our family. With as much calm as I could muster, I asked her if she had seen my earrings. Clara's eyes widened, and she stammered out a denial, but her reaction only made me more certain. My bridesmaids, sensing the tension, gathered around us, their expressions a mix of concern and suspicion. The atmosphere in the room grew thick with unease as I pressed her further, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger as I confronted Clara about the missing earrings. Janice approached us, her face a mix of curiosity and concern. She asked what I was doing, but I held up my hand to stop her from interrupting. My eyes locked onto Clara's, and I repeated my question more firmly this time. Clara looked increasingly uncomfortable, her eyes darting around the room. And just then, Stephen came over, sensing the growing tension. He tried to pull me away, suggesting that maybe I had too much to drink. His words only fueled my frustration. I turned to him, my voice steady but filled with anger, and I told him that he knew very well I had hardly touched any alcohol that night, so he should not even suggest such a ridiculous thing. I turned back to Clara, glaring at her, my patience wearing thin. The room fell silent as everyone watched the confrontation unfold. Clara's face turned pale, and she began to stammer, trying to deny any wrongdoing, but I could see through her act. Finally, with a shaky hand, Clara reached into her purse and pulled out my earrings. She handed them to me with a mumbled apology, her eyes avoiding mine. The relief I felt at seeing the earrings was almost overwhelming, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of anger and betrayal. Janice and Stephen looked on, stunned. Janice's face flushed with embarrassment while Stephen's expression shifted from disbelief to anger as he realized what had happened. The room was thick with tension as the reality of Clara's actions sank in. "I can't believe you would do this on our wedding day," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of hurt and fury. Clara mumbled another apology, but it felt hollow. This wasn't just about the earrings, it was also about trust and respect. Stephen, now fully grasping the situation, turned to Clara, his face a mask of disappointment and anger. "How could you do this?" he demanded, his voice low but intense. Clara had no answer. She stood there, looking down at her feet, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The incident was the final straw, confirming all my worst suspicions about her kleptomania and reinforcing my determination to protect myself from her destructive behavior. Stephen, for the first time, stood by me, acknowledging that Clara's actions were unacceptable. My mother, who had been watching the whole scene unfold, was far less gracious than I had been. She angrily yelled at Clara that she had no right to steal from her own family members. This is when Janice tried to defend her daughter's actions, claiming it might have been accidental. I had had enough of their excuses. I turned to Janice and with a calm but firm voice said, "Janice, you know very well that your daughter has a problem. She needs to go to therapy before she steals more important things from people." The bluntness of my words seemed to hit Janice hard. She opened her mouth to say something but then thought better of it and fell silent. Clara looked even more ashamed. My mother, still fuming at Clara, added, "This is your brother's wedding, a day of celebration. How could you bring yourself to ruin it by stealing something so precious from our family?" As the room remained silent, I could feel the eyes of our guests on us, their shock and discomfort palpable. The joyous atmosphere of the wedding had been tainted by Clara's actions. In the days that followed our wedding, Stephen and I had several long conversations about his sister's behavior and how we would handle her in the future. He apologized profusely for doubting me initially and agreed that Clara needed professional help. We also decided to set clear boundaries with her to protect ourselves and our future family. After Stephen had a long talk with his mother, and also after several people reached out to Janice, she firmly admitted that Clara did indeed have a problem. It wasn't easy for her to face, but the pressure from family and friends made her realize that she couldn't ignore her daughter's issues any longer. Acknowledging the severity of the situation, Janice took decisive action. She arranged for Clara to see a therapist, hoping that professional help could address the underlying issues driving her kleptomania. In addition to therapy, Clara also joined a kleptomaniac support group. This group helped her connect with other individuals who shared similar struggles, providing her with the opportunity to talk about her addiction openly and understand it better. Although I never stayed in touch with Clara after the incident at my wedding, I would keep tabs on her through what Stephen would tell me. Despite the hurt and betrayal I felt, I was forgiving enough to give her the benefit of the doubt and hope that she could truly recover from her addiction. Over the years, Clara seemed to improve significantly. She even met someone from her support group who understood her struggles and eventually became her husband. To our surprise, Clara and her partner had a shotgun wedding one day, choosing to keep it very private. They didn't invite anyone and only informed us through Janice the night after the wedding had taken place. Stephen and I were initially taken aback by the secrecy of their wedding. However, we understood that this might have been what Clara needed, something low-key and personal without the pressure and scrutiny of a big family event. Despite not being part of the celebration, we were genuinely happy for her and wished her all the best. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't last very long for the two of them. It turns out Clara's husband was caught stealing important documents and equipment like keyboards and mouse from his workplace. His repeated thefts over the years led to his arrest and subsequent sentencing to serve time. The news devastated Clara, and with nowhere else to go, no job to sustain her, she had no choice but to move back in with Janice. Janice took her in for a few months, but it quickly became clear that it wasn't a sustainable solution since she didn't have enough money to take care of her jobless daughter every month. Clara wasn't making any progress in getting back on her feet, and Janice was tired of the situation. Knowing that Stephen and I lived in a bigger place without any rent, since we had bought the place years ago, Janice called Stephen for help, asking if we could let Clara stay with us for a few months while she worked on getting back on her feet. When Stephen brought up the idea, I was vehemently against it. Just recently, we welcomed a wonderful baby boy into our lives, and taking care of our son while balancing work has been quite a task. Given this busy time and my discomfort around Clara, I didn't want to have her at our place, especially someone who likes to steal. I did not want the added tension in our life, so I asked him if Clara had even started looking for a job during all the months she had been unemployed and was staying over at Janice's place, but Stephen shook his head no. However, he assured me that perhaps staying with us would motivate her to work on herself and expressed that as her brother, he should be there for her in this difficult time. Stephen also assured me that Clara had changed and wasn't a kleptomaniac anymore, so I didn't have to worry about her stealing from me anymore. Despite my strong reservations against her, I begrudgingly agreed to let her move in, hoping that Stephen's faith in his sister would be justified. The arrangement began with Clara moving into our guest room. She was quite polite and friendly to me when she moved in, and it looked like she seemed to have changed. However, I was on edge and kept a close eye on my belongings just in case. Clara initially seemed grateful and determined to make things work. She promised she would look for a job and contribute to the household. However, weeks passed, and there was little sign of progress. Clara spent most of her days in her room doing absolutely nothing but sleeping in her bed the whole day and only coming out of the room when she was hungry. I started to worry that we had made a mistake. Stephen tried to reassure me, reminding me that Clara needed our support. I wanted to believe him, but the anxiety lingered. Despite my misgivings, I continued to support Stephen's decision, hoping that our help would make a difference in Clara's life. However, to no one's surprise, I began noticing items going missing from my kitchen. For instance, my expensive ceramic plate, which I usually only reserve for guests, mysteriously disappeared when I needed it for a guest who had come over to our place. Initially, I brushed it off, thinking I must have misplaced it, but deep down, I knew I was usually organized about such things. The suspicion lingered, but I chose to dismiss it, hoping it was just a case of misplacement so I would not have to confront Clara. Next, my childhood mug, a cherished item I had used to drink my coffee every day for decades, disappeared one morning. This was not only weird but a significant blow because the mug held sentimental value, as it was gifted to me by my grandfather. When I couldn't find it, I asked Stephen for help in searching the house. He knew how much that mug meant to me, so he was worried as well. When we couldn't find it anywhere, I suggested confronting Clara about it since I had a strong suspicion, and she was the only one who could have taken it. However, Stephen discouraged me. He argued that Clara was already going through a tough time and urged me to let him handle the situation. So I reluctantly agreed. When Stephen confronted Clara about the missing items, she adamantly denied any involvement, insisting that we must have misplaced them somewhere. I could clearly hear their heated argument echoing from her room. It was clear that Clara refused to accept any responsibility, and Stephen, still holding on to a soft spot for his sister, emerged from the room to inform me that Clara had nothing to do with it. I scoffed at his delusional behavior. It was hard to believe that Clara, given her history, would suddenly be innocent in this situation. Frustrated and feeling like I had to take matters into my own hands, I began locking away all my important belongings in a safe. I even went as far as purchasing another safe from Amazon specifically to secure my expensive perfume bottles and makeup items. Stephen thought my actions were ridiculous and accused me of not trusting his sister. In the midst of our argument, he even labeled me a bored stay-at-home mom, which was utterly ridiculous considering I had a thriving freelancing career and earned more than enough just by working from home while also taking care of our kid full-time. I argued back passionately, insisting that he had no right to call me that. Just because I didn't go to an office every day like he didn't mean my work wasn't important. I reminded him that I not only worked but also took care of our son and managed the house. I went on to further explain that as long as Clara stayed with us, things would continue to go missing. I told him firmly that this was either a return to her old ways, or she had never truly stopped stealing in the first place. However, Stephen refused to believe that his sister was stealing from us. He and I were at odds over this, with him wanting to believe in Clara's innocence and me feeling the need to protect myself and my belongings. Well, I didn't have to wait long for my suspicions to be validated. Yesterday, Stephen woke up to find his laptop missing as he prepared for work. Initially, he asked me if I had taken it for some reason, but I assured him that I wouldn't do that since I had my own laptop. Then he speculated that perhaps he had left it in the office the previous night. However, things took a more serious turn when he realized that his wallet was also missing from the drawer downstairs where he kept his car keys. This was a major concern because his wallet contained not only a substantial amount of money but also his driver's license and credit cards. Stephen began to panic as he searched frantically around the house, checking every nook and cranny, hoping to find his missing belongings. I could see his anxiety mounting with each passing moment. Meanwhile, I sat there with a knowing smile, as I had already pieced together who was responsible for this. As Stephen called out for Clara, his voice filled with increasing worry and frustration, there was no response. He hurried into her room, expecting to find her there, but the room was empty. He continued to call out for her, his voice echoing through the house, but there was still no answer. Then he turned to me and asked if I knew where she was, but I simply shrugged, unable to hide my satisfaction at being proven right. Stephen's frustration was palpable as he then repeatedly tried to call Clara, only to be met with silence on the other end. His anger grew, and he dialed his mother's number to vent his frustrations. However, instead of receiving the sympathy he sought, Janice attempted to pacify him by downplaying the whole situation again. She mentioned that even if Clara did steal his wallet, the items inside were replaceable anyway. This further infuriated Stephen. He erupted in anger during the call, telling her that Clara had no right to steal from him when he had been defending her to me all this while. I couldn't help but shake my head and laugh in disbelief, realizing just how much this family tended to baby Clara and defended her actions even when they faced serious consequences like this. When Clara finally decided to return home in the evening after not picking up Stephen's calls all day, she looked like she had just come from a bar, clearly intoxicated. Stephen, who had been consumed with worry and frantically trying to reach her, immediately confronted her about his missing laptop and wallet. Clara, in her drunken state, attempted to calm him down by denying any involvement at first. However, Stephen's frustration was at a breaking point, and he threatened to involve the authorities if she didn't come clean about the theft. At this ultimatum, Clara broke down and tearfully admitted the truth. It turns out that Clara had started an online store where she had been systematically stealing from us for the past few weeks that she had been living with us and selling our belongings on her store. My disbelief turned to horror when she confessed to everything she had stolen from us, including my breast milk, which she claimed was highly valuable and had fetched a significant amount of money. I listened in disgust as Clara confessed to stealing not just Stephen's belongings but also my prized ceramics, including my expensive pieces and my cherished old mug. She admitted to taking various other items from around the house that were lying around. Stephen, overwhelmed with a mix of anger and betrayal, started shouting at her for violating his trust. As I write this, Clara is still in our home, and I am utterly disgusted by her presence. I feel strongly that she needs to leave our place, and I believe my husband needs to show some backbone in handling this situation. Out of all the things she has done, I can't believe she has been stealing my breast milk, which is intended just for my baby. I want to call the police on her, but I know it will drastically spoil my relationship with my husband. Ida, if I kick my sister-in-law out after everything she's stolen from us? Update 1. Wow, when I posted this last week, I had no idea that my post would become this popular. It's quite amusing that some of you have been suggesting I leave my husband over this situation. I'm not going to break up my marriage just because Stephen has a kleptomaniac sister. Like many people, my husband has a soft spot for his family, and that's something I understand and respect. Despite our disagreements regarding his sister, he is the one who has suffered the most after his laptop and wallet were stolen by her. Also, if I forgot to write this earlier, I'm mentioning it now, Clara did return his credit cards, but she had already sold the wallet and laptop and used whatever cash she found in his wallet for drinking at a bar. Now coming on to the main update. I reached a point last week where I had to put an ultimatum on my husband. Either he asked his sister to move out, or I take our son to my parents' place. If Clara continued to stay with us, I couldn't tolerate living with someone who would steal my breast milk to earn money from random strangers. It was creepy and disgusting. Surprisingly, Stephen admitted that he had been contemplating the same thing. He was relieved that I brought it up and assured me that he would ask her to leave. We both sat down to talk to his sister and gave her a day's notice to move out immediately. Initially, Clara panicked and called Janice in desperation, who in turn called Stephen to change his mind. However, Stephen had reached his limit and firmly stated that Janice needed to take care of her own daughter because he needed to prioritize me and our baby. He also didn't hold back in informing Janice about all the weird things Clara had been stealing from us, which effectively silenced Janice. Clara officially moved out yesterday, and I know it's not very nice of me to say this, but I'm glad that she's finally gone from our lives. I'm also glad that she did what she did because now my husband has learned his lesson, and he will never agree to invite her to stay with us, which brings me a great sense of relief.